Just wanted to give everybody an update on the work that Indigenous Services Canada is doing to support First Nations communities in the Atlantic that were so affected by Hurricane Fiona. And so to date, we've spent $4 million through EMAP, which is the Emergency Management Program that Indigenous Services Canada runs. And this is really based on immediate community needs. In my conversations with chiefs in the early days, it was things like making sure that there were enough generators, fuel to run those generators, all kinds of different equipment and supports for people, including supporting people who needed to leave home and go to a warming center. And so that's really what that money has been spent on, immediate needs. Also, we've distributed $295 per household affected on reserve. So this is about $1 million already delivered, and again, through the emergency management portfolio. And we have every intention of being there as communities do the assessment on what kinds of infrastructure repair will be necessary for homes and for community centers and other kinds of critical infrastructure. And we've indicated to the communities that we will be there with them as they begin that important work. All the communities to date that we're working with now have their power restored, which is great news. But it has been a really stressful time, just like everybody else in the Atlantic coast. And certainly, as I spoke with the chiefs, it was, I just want to commend them all on their leadership. There was immediate action, obviously, lots of preparedness that went into getting communities ready, and so a real sense of, having the capacity to be able to deal with something like this. But nonetheless, we're there as a strong partner to help the communities.
First of all, I want to send off my heartfelt appreciation for the chiefs and their coordination efforts. I know Mi'kmaq and Wolastoq communities were affected by Hurricane Fiona across 5 provinces. I was in direct conversation with many of them from day one, talking to them about what they needed. We knew that communities not only were without power, but they had damage to houses. I'm really glad that we've stepped up to make sure that we were going to be there for all Canadians. That includes First Nations on reserve, and a lot of the times, when we look at some of the intricacies around jurisdiction, we wanted to make sure that, just like in the pandemic, no one was left behind, and that's part of what we were doing here today, making sure that the Mi'kmaq communities were involved, and I'm really happy with the minister's announcement today. I know that each of the communities, Mi'kmaq and Wolastoq households, will receive $295, a lot of them $295 per household. I know a lot of them lost freezer fills of food and all kinds of things that spoiled, and this is a part of us helping them out, and this is just the beginning of the journey. We know we have $300 million that is more flexible and inclusive of Indigenous communities, and we're going to be continuing to listen to Indigenous communities, the Mi'kmaq and the Wolastoq that were affected by this, and moving forward in a way with our community leaders in a really collaborative approach. Thank you.
Look, I want to extend sincere gratitude to Minister Hajdu and to Jaime, who's been an absolute leader, making sure that the whole of government understands the needs of Indigenous communities in the wake of Hurricane Fiona. I'm telling you, it's still a mess back home, and a lot of communities in my part of Nova Scotia, including the Pictou Landing First Nation, where I visited the other day as part of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, they sit on the North Shore of Nova Scotia, which was hit incredibly hard. The kinds of concerns that I heard about when I was talking to people in the community were really worrying and very human. Jaime mentioned food spoilage. People went nearly 2 weeks without having electricity. There was an enormous concern in the days after Fiona about medicine going bad that needed to be kept refrigerated. With the ability to quickly flow almost $1 million and knowing that there's more coming, this is going to make a real difference. I'm just pleased as somebody who grew up in the area that I still live today, that every department is looking to see what they can do to help people who've been affected. It's really important that we make sure we're paying specific attention to the unique needs of Indigenous communities in Atlantic Canada. We've got power lines that are still down. We've got trees that are blocking roads. Making sure that we're giving our full attention to the needs of Indigenous communities and looking across every aspect of what the federal government can do gives me great faith that we're on the right track. It's going to be a long road to recovery before our communities look and feel the way that they used to, but I have all the faith in the world that we're going to get there because of the kind of leadership that we've seen from Minister Hajdu today. Thank you so much.
questions? Any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
This week, something substantive happened on the issue of the just transition and the clean energy transformation. Workers from across Alberta have called out this Prime Minister for the lack of action and lack of vision on investing in the clean energy economy. It is without precedent when we have Alberta Federation of Labour, iron workers, Unifor, steel workers, the operating engineers, IBW, boilermakers, representatives of industrial workers in Alberta saying they want to be part of a clean energy future. So when we hear the Conservatives talking, they continually ignore the issues that are being faced by Alberta workers who are already facing this transition. It is happening. Big Oil is making record profits, and they're investing that money in automation, and they are getting rid of jobs. The future jobs in Western Canada and for Canada will be in the energy transformation. So this is a huge opportunity for the Prime Minister to show he understands where the economy needs to go to meet his climate promises that he continues to miss, that he's made at the international level, but also on the issue of unity in this country by reaching out to workers in Western Canada with a plan. Unfortunately, all we're hearing from this Prime Minister is aspirational talk, nice words. What we need to see is a commitment, like we've seen in the United States with Joe Biden's administration, who promised to transform the American economy through, quote, good-paying union jobs. The potential for a clean energy economy in Alberta is extraordinary. It is a better location than any other location in the world to create a clean energy economy, and yet the federal government is missing in action. So I have the letters from the Alberta Federation of Labour calling on the Prime Minister to step up his game. The New Democrats are calling on the Prime Minister to step up his game. We need action on the climate crisis, and we need it through working with Labour, working with workers in Western Canada on a clean energy economy. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. MP George Chahal from Calgary Skyview, and I would just like to take this opportunity to congratulate Premier-designate Danielle Smith on her election last night. And as we did with Premier Kenney, we are looking very much forward to working with Premier-designate Smith and her whole team. There are a lot of issues that are affecting Alberta right now. The evolution of energy, fueling the world, opioids crisis, housing, and of course, affordability. And so we're very much looking forward to working together with her team. J'aimerais commencer tout d'abord aujourd'hui en félicitant Mme Smith pour son élection hier soir en tant que Première ministre de l'Alberta. Moi et mon collègue député Chahal de Calgary Skyview sont vraiment au point de travailler avec son gouvernement. Il y a énormément de dossiers qu'on veut travailler ensemble, notamment le coût de la vie, le logement, tout ce qui est l'énergie pour le Canada, mais aussi pour le monde, et aussi la crise des opioïdes. Donc, on est vraiment content de travailler avec ce nouveau gouvernement. Ah, dommage. Well, we'll leave it as it is. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
You know, I have to say, I didn't think there would be a day in Parliament when I would come out and be so disturbed and frustrated by what we learned yesterday through Global News, and the fact that the leader of the opposition is intentionally seeking the support of people who hold an ideology that hates women. I have to say I'm outraged by this as a woman in this country. I'm in disbelief that he was doing this for 4.5 years and only stopped because he got caught. I'm incredulous that the Conservative Party announced that they were going to do an investigation into this, and then shortly thereafter said they're not doing this investigation. I don't understand how someone who wants to perhaps lead this country one day would do something so hurtful to half of its population. I don't understand how someone who has said that he stands for human rights, which, by the way, include women, for most of us, would intentionally and deliberately try to seek the support of people whose stated ideology is that they hate women, that they want to perpetuate violence against women, and in fact can be tied back to actual incidents where women have been killed. I think that this is completely and totally unacceptable. As a member of Parliament in this House, these actions make me feel unsafe, and quite frankly, an apology is not enough, because this was deliberate and this was intentional. And even if, and we don't know because the investigation is no longer underway, but I do think Canadians deserve answers on this, and particularly Canadian women. Even if this was someone in his office, the fact of the matter is the buck stops with you. When your office, as the leader, you are responsible for this. You set the tone. So whether you knew or not, you set the tone and what was acceptable and unacceptable behavior. And the fact that we don't know whether it was someone in his office or whether it was him, we don't know that because there's no investigation. But the fact of the matter is that someone thought this was acceptable behavior, and that's your responsibility as the Member of Parliament, as now the leader of a party. And I just can't accept that you can pretend that you didn't know about this, because it was happening for 4.5 years, and it only stopped because you got caught. What does that say about this individual's leadership? What does that say about his values? And what does that say about how he intends to lead this country? There are so many more questions as a result of this investigation done by Global News than there are answers. And what worries me more is what else he was up to. This was done in secret, and it stopped because he got caught. What else was he doing in secret? I believe Canadians deserve answers. I believe all of us in Parliament deserve answers. And I don't understand why his Conservative caucus is not demanding those answers. Yesterday in the House of Commons, when the Prime Minister demanded an apology, demanded accountability, there was only one Conservative Member of Parliament that stood up and clapped, and that was Cathy Wagenthal. There was only one Conservative Member of Parliament who had the courage to say that this was wrong. Everyone else in the House of Commons did, because we understand what this means for women in our country, and we understand what this means for people in our country more broadly. And I have to say, I'm incredibly disappointed, but more than anything, I'm mad, and I want answers. Thank you.
Brunswick Premier says he's basically thinking about pulling support for the World Juniors, and if Hockey Canada doesn't change its thoughts, your Premier is musing about things. Just wondering, should the World Juniors go ahead at the Metro Centre and down the street from your office?
I hadn't heard about this news, but the World Juniors have an incredible impact on amateur athleticism and sport and overall, and an incredible economic impact in the region. I'll have to learn more about any position taken by the Atlantic Premiers on that.
But basically, from your position, you need the World Juniors to go ahead for downtown Halifax and the people in your riding? It's
an undeniable benefit to the city, to the capital city of Nova Scotia, and undeniable benefit to the athletes. So I'm firmly in the camp of I would like to see the World Juniors happen in Halifax.
Even with the current administration, Hockey Canada.
This is about the young athletes coming up and doing the best thing that they can, working as hard as they can. But I just don't know about the other political positions. Okay.
Premier Higgs is talking about not supporting the World Juniors coming up if something isn't done with Hockey Canada. I understand that both Halifax and Moncton are going to host the World Juniors. You're the political minister for Greater Nova Scotia. What do you think?
More than being a minister from Nova Scotia, I'm a person with a conscience who thinks it's absolutely disgusting what we're seeing happen with Hockey Canada. I think it's a brave thing for somebody like Premier Higgs to make a statement like that. This is the first I'm learning of it. Anything we can do to signal to women in Canada that this isn't going to be tolerated, we need to do. I'm so pleased to see that corporate sponsors are pulling out of their support for Hockey Canada. It's just completely unacceptable. This is just a function of being a decent human being. If you can't stand up for the mistreatment of women and the attempt to, in a clandestine way, hide funding that's now being used to pay settlements rather than correct problems, then you got big problems.
Do you think the tournament should still go ahead, even if there aren't any changes?
Yeah, we'll just take you around there. Right here. Yeah, sorry.
So if there aren't any changes at Hockey Canada, do you still think this tournament should go ahead?
Well, I think there should be changes at Hockey Canada. I think that's the solution. I don't like the idea of taking the lifetime, the opportunity of a lifetime from a bunch of people who are not complicit in this behavior. But if it comes down to the refusal of an organization to take responsibility, it's certainly the kind of consequence that we ought to be thinking about as a society. Of course, there's regulating bodies who make these decisions. I don't mean to suggest that the federal government is in charge of all this. But anybody who's not willing to stand up to Hockey Canada in this instance needs to give their head a shake. This is not okay. It's never been okay. And for too long, women have suffered with these problems that are rampant across society, being swept under the rug. It's absolutely disgusting. And if we don't have the courage to stand up, even though it's our national pastime, even though it's a sport I've loved as long as I could walk, it's so much more important to treat people with respect, dignity, and to pursue equality at whatever cost.
Andy Philbert was just telling us that his office is literally down the street from the Metro Centre, that he really wants to see the World Juniors go ahead from an economic point of view. Is it worth risking the economics for Moncton and for Halifax that would get the benefit from outside? I'm not trying to put you in the position, but it's a hard thing, right?
Look, the cost of not protecting the dignity of survivors of sexual assault is far greater than the cost of not hosting a hockey tournament. The reality of what we're seeing at Hockey Canada is just, it's completely unacceptable. But there's a solution here. We don't need to jump to the conclusion that we have to take away this extraordinary opportunity for young athletes who are thinking about a career in professional hockey. We can actually push Hockey Canada to make some change, and I think that's the obvious and simple solution in this instance. I really do have to scoot, guys. Happy to chat more next time I'm around, though. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think he's a good minister.
Yeah. Oh, say that in the house.
Would you be open to renegotiating the child welfare deal if the tribunal rejects it?
Right now what we're doing is really awaiting the decision of the CHRT. I will say this, all the parties at the table worked really hard to get to the solution that's before the tribunal. The compensation approach is Indigenous-led, it's designed by the Indigenous partners, and we look forward to the deliberations of the CHRT.
Would you be open to renegotiation if the tribunal says this doesn't comply with our orders?
Well, I've always said that what we want is we want to get to a place where the parties are satisfied, where there's a fair and Indigenous-led approach, and where we can actually settle this. So listen, I think the next step is to wait for the deliberation of the CHRT to hear their feedback, and we'll take it a step at a time.
As it stands right now, it doesn't include children in federally placed and federal placements, kinships.
I don't see how this deal can go ahead when it's leaving out children that were part of the award that was decided by the tribunal. What really concerns me is that the government is willing to spend more money on a whole manner of people who may be eligible, but I think it's about undermining the authority of the tribunal to force those orders through. They have to respect these orders.
And do you think that the changes that are being made to child welfare to give Indigenous communities jurisdiction, that perhaps they're moving too fast? Because we've heard some concerns from some Indigenous Child and Family Services that they're already taking care of kids in their own services and preventing those kids from going into care. And they're afraid that there could be an influx of kids entering the system because the changes are just going so fast and they're going to lose funding and these kids will no longer be in their care. Have you heard any of those concerns?
The concerns that we've been hearing about the child welfare system is we know that the federal government wants to download all their obligations. But if they download it without proper funding, children are going to get hurt, and First Nation communities are going to be blamed. We, as New Democrats, completely support the right and the ability of First Nation communities to handle the issues of child welfare. But this has to be properly funded. There has to be mechanisms in place, and there has to be an accountability mechanism. And right now, I think this is about the government trying to cut their losses and running.
So would you like to see that transition period when communities get this jurisdiction perhaps spread out a little longer?
We certainly know that there are some communities who've been working at this for a long time and they're ready to go and they need the proper funding. We also know that there are huge challenges, particularly in far northern communities with isolation, with poverty. The government has to be looking at this through the lens of what is good for the children and not what is good for getting Indian Affairs off the obligations that they have failed on time and time again.
Thank you so much for stopping.
Thank you.